I promised that I would go through these key story elements with a romance. But you thriller writers are going to want to stick around for this one, because this classic American musical actually details a villain that is a serial killer, decades before Sweeney Todd. I just watched the Trevor Nunn production of Oklahoma with Hugh Jackman, and it's such an excellent example of a classic romance that I thought I'd use that this week to illustrate the key story elements of Act 1. It's actually not that easy to find many movies that have a classic romance structure of an equal hero and heroine. And Oklahoma really does, except for the last act where Laurie is so traumatized that she sort of settles into a submissive wife. Or maybe it was just the era. Wait, that's our era. Now, Oklahoma is an iconic American musical, right? You think romance. But it's actually a very dark romance. The villain, Jud Fry, is essentially an incel stalker turned mass murderer. So the dominant subgenre here is romantic suspense because of the very active villain and the huge jeopardy. Romantic suspense is one of the more lucrative romance subgenres. If you didn't catch the play, I highly recommend the 1955 film. So let's go to the whiteboard for our chart. So who's the hero? Well, Hugh Jackman, that is Curly. And since it's a romance, we have an equal heroine who is Laurie. And the villain is the farmhand, Jud Fry. What are the hero's special skills? Look, I said it was a romance. Yes, Curly's hot. But he's also a cowman, which is what Rodgers and Hammerstein call a cowboy because I guess it's more manly. He's also a pioneer. This musical is about the settlement of Oklahoma Territory. So Curly has all of those pioneer skills that are going to allow him to survive and thrive on the prairie. He has independence, resilience, physical strength. More specific to his character, he has a sense of humor, and maybe a little too much of one because it's one of his pranks that starts all the trouble to begin with. And he's a charmer of women of all ages, including the much older Aunt Eller. And oh yes, he can talk his way in and out of just about anything. And that's a special skill that is going to save his life in a very suspenseful scene. We also see that he's perceptive about people and danger. He realizes that Jud is an actual threat. So what are the heroine's special skills? Well, they're pretty much a mirror of Curly's. Laurie's a pioneer woman, so she is resilient, strong, independent. She has a sense of humor to match Curly's, and she has a rebellious streak that gets her into big trouble when she acts impulsively to hurt Curly. She also is intuitive and perceptive. She gets that Jud is dangerous, but she still goes with him to that box social, which shows just how dangerously impulsive she is. All right, let's go to the villain for a minute. The villain is Jud Fry. What are his special skills? We hear from Aunt Eller that he's the best farmhand she's ever had, which somewhat explains why Aunt Eller dismisses Laurie's plea for help when she tells Aunt Eller that Jud is stalking her. But it's also sadly realistic that women who should know better will sometimes bend over backwards to excuse and enable predatory men. I think we've seen a lot of that in the last few years. But Jud is good at wearing a mask of sanity, which is what makes it even more terrifying when it slips. And it slips. And while he's not exactly a rocket scientist, he does have a certain malevolent cunning that has enabled him to fly under the radar while essentially getting away with mass murder. Now, what does the hero want? Laurie. What does Laurie want? Curly. What does the villain want? Laurie. So here we have the classic storytelling mirror that the hero and the villain want the same thing. They both want Laurie. And the main conflict of the story is the two of them fighting over Laurie. Jud also wants Curly dead. To be fair, Curly also wants Jud dead. And that leads to one of the weirder hero's plans to get what he wants, I think, in the whole history of storytelling. Curly's initial plan to fight Jud is to try to convince him to hang himself. And he does it in a song, Poor Jud is Dead, and it almost works. I told you, Curly's a good talker. What is the ordinary world of the hero and heroine? Well, it's the prairie, it's the territory where they both live. And specifically, you could say it's Laurie and Aunt Eller's farm. What is the special world that they go into to get what they want? The town where the box social is going to take place. There are two other special worlds that are represented in this musical. One is Kansas City, the big city world, and the other is Laurie's dream world, which we see in the dream ballet sequence. Since the box social doesn't happen until the second half of the play, it's just smart storytelling to give us the experience of entering a special world with the Kansas City and dream ballet sequences. And finally, what is the inciting incident? The big event that forces the hero to take action? Jud asks Laurie to the box social, and Laurie agrees to go to spite Curly for winding her up about this imaginary Surrey with a fringe on top. So now Curly will be forced to fight for Laurie, and Jud ups the stakes immediately by deciding that he has to kill his rival, which he's going to do with the old knife in the paper porno viewer trick. How's that for an all-American musical? You don't hear many people talking about this aspect of Oklahoma, even though it's the main plot. It's completely realistic psychology. So maybe it endures not just because of the great songs, but because it explores a very dark aspect of the American psyche. It's something to think about anyway. And I just want to close by saying watching musicals is an excellent way of learning key story elements of story structure. They're really easy to spot because virtually every key story element is going to be depicted in song and dance as a big set piece scene, including the desire line of the hero and heroine, the plan, the inciting incident, entering the special world, the final battle, everything is going to be a song and dance. We've got some time. There are a lot of free musicals on. Try it sometime.